Welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet, the go-to podcast for parents with multiple kids, especially those with twins, triplets, or more, who are navigating the maze of modern family life and personal finance. Whether you're overwhelmed by education or retirement planning, parenting dilemmas, career transitions, or trying to define your purpose and plan, we're here to guide you with empathy, encouragement, and expertise. Hosted by Paul Fenner, founder of Tama Capital, a certified financial planner and parent to 4 kids, including a set of triplets, our podcast is your ally in the quest for financial peace of mind, proving that money matters, but family comes first. Subscribe now and join our community of empowered parents at tamacapital.com.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Tama may retain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
What does comprehensive financial planning even mean? At Tama Capital, it means a family office where lifestyle planning such as retirement, college, portfolio management, tax prep, and planning all are under one umbrella. But it goes beyond numbers. We focus as much on the emotional side of financial planning as we do on the financial side. We get you. We understand your challenges of building a family, business, or career, and a healthy life. We are devoted to wealth planning for families like yours because we are you. Learn how our family can help your family by visiting tamacapital.com.
Hey everyone, we're going to be taking off some time for the holidays, but I didn't want to leave you without a podcast. So this week and next, we're going to feature our 2 most downloaded episodes over the last almost 3 years. Can't believe I'm actually saying that, of the Emotional Balance Sheet podcast. I can't thank you enough for being listeners, for those that provide feedback. It's been an incredible journey, and I'm already looking forward to next year's new lineup of guests. But this week, we have our most downloaded episode ever, Scott Hanselman. I came to know Scott back in my corporate career days, learning about time management and productivity. So as you're taking some time off this holiday season to spend with family and friends, I think this is a great episode to figure out how to become more intentional with your time and setting clear expectations for yourself and your family. Enjoy. So, Scott, I think probably the best place to start, you're really known in the coding community, but I don't know if my audience will really know who you are, but they're certainly going to know you after our conversation and why I've had to have you on the podcast for a long time. And again, I can't thank you enough for being on. So why don't we start with your background and who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Scott Hanselman, and I'm a program manager at Microsoft. I've worked at Microsoft for about 15 years, but I've been in software for about 30. This is actually 30 years and 1 month this year. I have a podcast as well. My last name is Hanselman, like Hansel and Gretel man. My podcast is called Hansel Minutes. So not only am I a coder and a programmer, but I also am a content creator, much like yourself. I've done 812 episodes of my podcast, and I've got a YouTube channel and a TikTok as well. So I just like to put good information out there. And ultimately, even though I've been coding for many years, I'm a teacher, and I will use whatever location, YouTube, TikTok, my blog, that I can to teach people.
So how I found you probably 8 years ago. We were talking before we hit the record button. And I don't exactly know how I found your YouTube video on scaling yourself, but that just put me over the edge in a very good way. And so why don't we start there with, again, you work at Microsoft and you have all these other platforms that you really help teach people. And you talk about life and productivity, which is at the center of what this podcast has turned out to be, this emotional balance sheet, especially for parents that we're all juggling. I know you're a dad as well.
Mhm.
So how did you first come about putting that video together?
I think that people don't talk enough about how they feel at the end of the day, and that they think that they need to suffer in silence, whether that be in silence with their partner or whether if they're not in a relationship, they're just in silence with themselves. They don't even talk to themselves. And they feel like they had a bad day. They were not productive. They sit quietly and they think bad thoughts about themselves. And then they wake up the next day and they hope that it's going to get better. And hope is not a strategy. It's not a plan. It's just you're on the treadmill and you're running as fast as you can and you're not thinking about your feet. So one day after feeling bad about myself, I decided to be more intentional and I started considering deliberate practice. And I talked to myself and said, this isn't working. I have to figure something else out.
So are you familiar with Cal Newport's work on deliberate practice?
I am. I was not at the time, and I didn't have a word for it, but that was the idea that mindfulness and being present was something that I was missing. So I needed to forgive myself on Friday for a non-productive week and reset on Monday, because Monday is an opportunity to give it a try and do it all over again.
So can you walk us through like how you do that? Because personally, I do the same thing. I think we are, to your point, we are our hardest critics, if you will, and don't give ourselves the empathy that we probably deserve.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a struggle with me for a long time, whether I was in my corporate career or now that I'm in, business for myself at Tama.
So we are our hardest because we want to do well, but we also are setting up these systems of failure. We're setting ourselves up to fail ahead of time, which just causes it to be a vicious cycle. So, for example, people who are listening may have a stack of books on their desk. If you're lucky, it's 1 or 2 books. But if you're not lucky, it may be 8 or 9. And then next thing you know, what is a list of books that I want to read is now a monument to my own failure. And it's just there reminding my subconscious that I'm never going to read those books. So I've started doing less and I've started sorting the things that I want to do by impact. You're not going to read those books, get them off your desk. They're stressing you out by their existence. Reminding yourself of the things you're not going to do are really challenging. So what I started doing was saying, all right, I'm not getting things done this week. I'm going to be more intentional about my week. What are the 3 things that I could do this week? Just 3, because 3 is a nice number that we can hold in our head, right? 3 things that I could get done this week that would help me feel good about myself. So if I did those 3 things, I would say, this was a great week. I really kicked this week's butt. And then I would try to orient my week such that I could do those 3 things as early as possible so I can get a quick win. So I'll give you an example. Yesterday, it was Monday, and it was it was a mediocre Monday. It was one of those case of the Monday type days. And my wife and I slept in, and we didn't get up till 9:30. And when she got up, we were just like, oh my, we've ruined the day. We've lost like this. We just felt like the day was ruined because we got up a couple hours late. And then we realized that the first step was to forgive ourselves. Obviously, our bodies needed that time. So we took that breath. Then we said, all right, we've lost some hours. That's a fact. We're not getting those hours back. What can we do in the next few hours that's going to be a quick win? She's like, well, I got to go to the library. I got to go to the store. I got to do this. I got to do that. I said, okay, but what's something really important that we need to do? Well, I need to call my mom. That was a thing that she wanted to do. She said, all right, well, let's do that. That's the most impactful thing. She called her mom. She had that conversation and she's like, all right, I've done something that was important. It was meaningful. And then went through the list rather than by nearest, like in the neighborhood, or most urgent, which is perceived urgency. It was, what's the thing that would make her feel successful in the day? And then I did the same. And by 1:00, we felt like we had our feet underneath us again. Does that make sense?
It does. So if I come back to that, let's just say you get your 3 things done and you get them done, I guess, early. Like maybe you're you're done by Wednesday or Thursday. What do you do? Because, and I'm asking this personally because I think I struggle with this. I can write those 3 things down on Monday or Sunday night when I'm prepping for the next week, and then I get them done. And rather than feeling great about myself, I feel like, oh, I still got another 2 or 3 days left in this week. I gotta do more rather than just stop and enjoy it.
Yeah. I think that people do not give themselves enough grace and people do not compliment themselves enough. I think that when you win something, you won. You did 3 things by Wednesday. You should give yourself a little bit of grace there. You should think about your expectations and reevaluate your expectations on yourself. Because usually stress and frustration and the sense that you need to do more is actually because you have an unrealistic standard that you're setting for yourself. But you set a standard. You said you were going to do 3 things and you did them. Why won't you give yourself credit for that?
So is there a way, and this is going to turn into a therapy session with you, Scott. Is there a way to help lower the standard without feeling like crap?
Yeah. You have to ask yourself, who created the standard?
I did.
Exactly. So when you meet the standard, when you set the grading curve and you get an A, are you not going to give yourself the A? Are you going to change the curve? You set the curve, right? It is not healthy to move the finish line.
And this actually, I got really interested in this probably a year or 2 ago because what I was finding, I was doing this on my own when it came to financial planning, and I was seeing some of my family office clients do the same thing. And Morgan Housel has this term of stopping the goalpost from moving.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you define enough? And once you define enough, then stop.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, me included, struggle with, getting to that point where it's like, okay, I wrote down what I wanted to do, which step number 1, and I got there. And then it's always, well, what's next? What's the next thing?
How would you treat a loved one if they had come to you with this feeling? You would tell them, you need to give yourself a little grace. You did a great job. Maybe you need to take Thursday off. That's what you would tell them, but you won't tell yourself.
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Grace is not a luxury. Grace is a gift that you give yourself. There's a great writer named Rebecca Christine who has a blog. She's a writer and an educator and a counselor, and she says grace is not a privilege or a luxury. Right? Life is a journey, not a destination. So if you're not going to give yourself that grace, then why would you give it to someone else?
Good point.
Yeah.
So there's a on my desk here, the poem "The Station" by Robert Hastings. Not sure if you've ever heard of it or not.
Mm-mm.
But for my family office clients that are listening to this, don't be surprised when you see this as a Christmas gift and coming your way. And that's the whole point of the poem by Hastings, is that life is a journey and it's supposed to be enjoyed. The station is just a point on the horizon that you'll never get to. It's always moving.
Yeah.
And Dan Sullivan has wrote a great book on this called The Gap and the Gain as well. And I think I really I've been tying those back to your scaling yourself talks over these last few months, and trying to give myself and really practice what I preach and give myself that own grace, and letting my clients know it's okay to figure out what this enough is, to where we can stop moving the goalpost.
Right. Grace isn't an action that you take. It's not a moment in time. It is a conscious decision. It is a mindset by which you choose to be kind to yourself rather than critical. You are cruel, and I'll be clear about that word. You're being cruel to yourself while being kind to others. So if you love yourself, then you will be kind to yourself. If your child or your partner came to you feeling like this, you would give them all this great advice that we're giving each other right now, except you won't give it to ourselves. So giving yourself room, understanding that there will always be more. You will die with stuff undone. And you have to know that that's okay and let that go. You're not going to get your to-do list. I'm probably not going to learn Chinese. It's been on the list. I'm still working through Chipotle level Spanish. I'm probably going to die having never learned Chinese. But am I going to shake my fist at the last moment and go, my one thing on the to-do list is I never learned Chinese, right? You're just not going to get those things done. So that's why you have to release these things to the universe. Turn off social media, turn off push notifications. There's no one push notification. I don't need anything pushed to me. I got enough stuff. Now you're pushing things into my to-do list. Turn all that stuff off. You got to let that time for deep work happen. And then when the deep work is over, give yourself a gift. After this podcast, I'm going to go get a McMuffin. Is it probably going to kill me at some point? Probably, but I deserve it.
Well, obviously we're going to link to our show notes on this episode are just going to be packed. I already started putting those together before we hit the record button. And your speeches, lectures, to me, when you're up there, you're like a professor. I'm going to link to all those. And so I don't want to necessarily get into all the things that you talk about, how you manage like email and turn off push notifications. Mm-hmm. But what I wanted to focus on during our conversation was really to go like another level or two deep. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that always stood out with the Scaling Yourself lecture was this understanding of efficiency versus effectiveness.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through, because you even point out those two words sound really, really similar, but they're not.
Yeah, I have been very blessed to give that talk in different countries where English is not the first language. And in chatting with different people, whether it be in a country where Arabic is their first language or a country where French is, sometimes if you go into the dictionary or even Google Translate and you put in the word effectiveness and you put in the word efficiency, you'll get the same word. So even native English speakers, if you say, hey, quick, what's the difference between these two words? They'll go, because you can, and you can kind of figure it out. But the way that I've decided to phrase it is that effectiveness is being goal oriented. To be effective is to pick a thing to do and to do that right thing. Like I picked a thing. Was that the right thing to do? That was the right choice. And then once you've picked it, efficiency is doing that thing right. So effectiveness is doing the right things and efficiency is doing things right. If you're a runner, if effectiveness is picking the direction that you run, while efficiency is being a very good runner in the direction that you have picked. So orienting, if you decide to do the wrong thing for your client, but you do it really well, that's going to be an amplified decision. You very efficiently were ineffective for that client.
So how did you come about that, this effectiveness and efficiency? Like how did you work that into scaling yourself and the work that you do? Because I know, like we've talked about, you've got a full-time job at Microsoft, but yet you make the time to do all these other really teachable moments on various platforms.
Well, it all comes down to thinking about what does impact mean. At Microsoft, we have these things called OKRs, right? Objectives and key results. And we have an objective like, delight the customer. And then a key result might mean 20% more downloads of this product or something like that. And then we have an associated business impact. Is that going to be a good thing for the business, a bad thing for the business? And then we are promoted or rewarded based on our relative impact. That's a pretty good analogy for how one should run their life. The difference is, though, with a business, the business goals are pretty clear, like make more money, shareholder value, blah, blah, blah. But when people get married or when people buy a house or when people move out of their parents' house and go on their own for the first time, they don't tend to make business plans. They don't tend to make plans at all. Like we spend all this time writing marriage vows, but no one ever writes like a marriage plan. Like, what is it that we're doing here exactly? So I try to apply the same sense of rigor about what are our objectives and our key results to my regular life. So when my wife and I had our marriage vows, she has an MBA. She was like, well, what are we really doing though? Like, what's our belief system? Like, what's our thing? Like, yeah, maybe you brush your teeth in a way that I find weird, but what's the point of this? And it's like, well, we decided early on, we've been married for 22 years, that we wanted to live a drama-free life where we could help as many people as possible and surround ourselves with family. So when we are thinking about stuff in our life, we go back to that core value, whether it be that business value that you're doing at work or that personal value. And a lot of times we say, well, yeah, those values are there. They're in the background. No, I'm talking about like, let's just level set. Let's stop. Let's stop this argument. Let's stop this moment or whatever. And let's say, is this a core value? Is this a thing we should be doing? Having those conversations in your personal life is the same as a business person being in a meeting and going, well, hang on, is this even a business we want to get into? You see how that works? It might sound aseptic. It might sound like, oh, weird. He's taking business things and applying it to his personal life. He must have an awful relationship with his wife. It's not about that. It's about pausing and waking up out of the matrix for a moment and being present and saying, what is it we're doing here? Is this the right thing to do? And then saying, okay, if it is, I'm going to reassert that this is the thing. Now I've made my effective choice. And now that I have a plan, I'm going to do it as efficiently as possible.
Well, I love that you brought that up, because one of the things that I wrote down like right before we started recording as well is going back to one of the lectures. I think you were over in another country when you recorded one of these, and you made the point on how the people the speaking engagement that you were doing, the people wanted to take you out and show you their city. And as much as you wanted to see their beautiful city, you're like, no, I'm getting on the plane and going back home because I only have 52 Saturdays a year with my 4-year-old son. You remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah. So it's a little bit morbid, but we have about 4,000 weeks, right? That means you have about 4,000 weekends in your life before you're dead. And if you really want to get morbid, I made a website called keysleft.com. You go to Keys Left, you put in how old you are and how fast you type, and it'll tell you how many emails you've got left. So every time you write an email, you ask yourself, should I have put that in a book? Should I have put that in a screenplay or a poem or a love letter? No, I sent an email to my boss. Well, you're not getting those keystrokes back. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'm all alone in Egypt and they want to take me to see the Sphinx, or I can go and hang out with my 2-year-old. I'm going to go back and see my 2-year-old. And people might say, you're insane. You should have hung out. The pyramids. Oh my God, the pyramids. I would rather take my son to see the pyramids later. But right now, there's 52 weekends and I'm going to miss one. That's 2% of my year. If one weekend's 2% of your years. Imagine the little Windows progress bar, right?
Yep.
You've got one of the, and every week it's 2%, right? So if you start thinking about things like that, it answers the questions of what should I be doing very clearly.
So to follow that up, given how you have your full-time role at Microsoft and all the other ventures that you do, how do you balance the two in your family and your personal life? And I know it's a very loaded question. And before you answer, I readily admit that, and I tell people this often, and I know for a fact it's this way with my life as well, is that I think this idea, this concept of work-life balance is a myth. There are times where our work will require us to do more, and there are times where our family lives will require us to do more and be there more. And so if you can envision the seesaw, it's never level plane. It's never a level plane. It's up or down.
Yeah. The idea that it's this or that, or it's this side of the coin or that side of the coin. One of the lowercase a arguments that I have with my wife is whether or not I should have my phone with me, or whether it should be like I leave work and the phone is gone. I think I've tried to tell her, I believe that it's more of a continuum. Like, yes, it would be rude for me to be at Red Robin and we're having burgers with the kids and I'm suddenly on my phone. But at the same time, if there is an urgent thing, I can take a moment and say, all right, is this important? Is this a thing that is truly going on? And the agreement that I've made with my wife is that 3 or 4 times a year, something will happen at work. Could be a PR thing, could be finance, could be whatever. Like, this is a fire. It's a real fire. The problem is if it's every Saturday, right? If there's 52 fires every year, then that's unhealthy. But if either my job is unhealthy, my relationship with my boss is unhealthy, my relationship with my phone is unhealthy. If you're finding yourself at Olive Garden sneaking into the bathroom to check email, that is probably unhealthy. But if you have a conscious, focused agreement with your partner that a couple of times a year there's going to be a thing, this is one of those times, then that's okay. And you're going to fall off the wagon, right? You're going to fall off the wagon and you say, oh my goodness, I got addicted again. I've done that. I'm really, really aggressive about my notifications. I don't want anything pushed to me unless it's urgent. So I have special rules in my email that only pop up the little Outlook toast, if it's my boss or a couple of different people. Like if Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, emails me, that is urgent. It doesn't matter where we are, kid's birthday. But, if my boss emails me on a Sunday, it's probably not a big deal. If he calls me, it's probably a big deal. You see the difference?
Yes. So that I was actually going to go, I wanted to go there next where, and again, your lectures on this topic, scaling yourself, are really the place to go. Is how do we find ways to make our work better? And, I had a front row seat to this when I was in corporate America and had a big staff and people constantly replying as soon as email comes in, like we talked about off camera, if you will. And I see it with my wife all the time, Teresa, and it's a real struggle. And can you provide our audience with maybe like a couple of ideas that we can utilize to help better our work environment?
Everyone has a different job, but for me, it was realizing that I'm not actively saving babies today. I have a blog post called Software and Saving Babies, where particularly early in career or younger people get really up and, get in a twist about stuff. And I'm like, hey, we're not saving babies. Now, if you are actively involved in baby saving software, if you're supporting the finance and, the capital needs of then yes, that's urgent and you should do that. But as a general rule, if I'm working on Windows Notepad, probably not saving babies right now. So getting that sense of perspective helped me. Then realizing that the feeling of serotonin when you pull to refresh in Outlook or in your mail app and you like pull down on your phone and something pops up, whether it be, a notification, a like, an email, that is excitement. Someone cares about me. What? There's someone out there, they really like me. That's urgency addiction. That is an actual thing. And I'm not saying I'm not immune from it. I'm saying that I note it. I go, I have been sitting on the toilet scrolling too long. Is that a gift that I'm giving myself? Like, okay, I had a rough week. I'm going to sit on the can and I'm going to scroll through Facebook. And that's because I want to. I'm doing it intentionally. That's different from, I just lost 30 minutes and I don't know what happened. That's the trick. So from a work perspective, if you remind your coworkers, like, is this what you want to be doing right now? Is this what feeds your spirit? Is this what moves the business forward? Is this the thing? Is your goal to get out of the office as fast as possible? You know what I mean? There's that myth that people work 8 hours a day. Most people work about 6. And about 2 hours a day is just goofing around. Well, maybe come and just work the hard 6 and then leave. But you can't do that without intentionality.
Yeah. And there's, I think with COVID, there's been this new experiment of working at home, but I know prior to that, I've read papers about companies doing just that, where they are working 6 hours a day. And because they know, like, if you come in the office, just work those 6 hours. And they had amazing response and input and productivity. I would imagine with that, because people could leave early to get their kids from school or get to the soccer game or soccer practice and whatnot.
Yep. Acknowledging that things are different is a really important aspect of things. A lot of people came to me because I've worked remotely for almost 15 years and said when COVID happened, like, oh, this is great, Scott, tell us all about your secrets and tell us how I'm supposed to do things now. It's like, well, this isn't remote work, right? Remote work means that I can go to McDonald's and use their Wi-Fi, and I can go to Starbucks and I can sit in a park and I can do all these different things. You know, I used to sit in the mall and just have the energy of people walking around me so that I could have that energy. And that's not a thing that we're able to do anymore. So acknowledging that remote work and quarantine work are not the same thing.
One of the struggles I had transitioning from my corporate career into TAMA on a full-time basis was not being around people anymore. Like I'm here in my office. I look to the left, there's a wall. I look to the right, there's a wall. And there's a wall in front of me and a wall behind me. And that's it. And to your point, I would go to my local library. Fortunately, I live in a nice community. We have a fairly new library. And I would go there just so I could be around some people. And occasionally I would go to the Panera to be around even more people to get that energy.
Yeah, to pretend that it's an office.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good feeling. It is lovely.
It is. And I think I missed that too during COVID. And I was like just longing to get out of these four walls.
Yep.
So what was COVID like for you? I was actually going to bring this up, so probably should just do it now. What was COVID like for you with working and balancing things from home?
Well, so the first thing that we noticed was that I was spending more time on meetings because everyone jumped on Teams and everyone jumped on Zoom. When before I could actually have some peace to myself. I realized that there were meetings happening in rooms that I wasn't in. But now, since everyone's got to be on Teams, we over meeting. You know, I mean, every meeting was I went from 2 or 3 hours of meetings a day to 6 and 7. So then I felt that I was having to work. That feeling like it's been video calls all day. So now I'll work at night when the kids are asleep.
Yes.
That started. So I've been looking at my calendar and just actively saying no to stuff. That's a challenging situation because there is inherent privilege in the ability to say no. You and I, as information workers, are able to say, I don't feel good today. I'm going to cancel that meeting, or, I need lunch. I'm going to cancel those 2 meetings, which someone working the Friolator, can't do. If I have to get on the bus and be at my shift by 9, COVID or not, that is really challenging. But for the information worker, I'm looking at my calendar right here. It looks like a game of Tetris. The calendar things are popping down in here. And it's like, okay, I see 2 one-on-ones and a check-in I could probably push and the business would be fine. And I could go for a walk. Giving yourself that mental health break is important. Knowing that you can is the grace that you give yourself.
I remember one of the pieces of your lecture too was if and forgive me if I misparaphrase your quote, but it was basically telling yourself, oh, I can just work one more night on this and be done with it. I can just work one more night and be done with this. If you have to tell yourself that it's just one more night and be done with it and you're not, you got a problem.
Right. Well, because it's, remember when I said a moment ago that I tell my wife every 3 or 4 months, it's like there's a time, it's conference season, or it's a moment, or it's a thing that's going on that I have to deal with. If that's every week, if it's like, like yesterday, I worked late. I worked until 9 yesterday. I gave my family a heads up. I told the kids I loved them. This is a rough day. Monday's going to suck. I'll be out at 9. All of that is setting expectations, right? Because if you don't set expectations, then that's going to build up resentment. Hey, you didn't come to dinner. Hey, you never showed up. Hey, the kids went to bed and never saw you. All of that is literally resentment. But by setting the expectation that, all right, I'm going to work late. Now, if I do that 5-6 days a week, that's unhealthy. That's a symbol of something unhealthy. The occasional push is okay, but doing it more than once or twice is a problem.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think my wife Teresa does listen to the podcast, and she knows that I've not been very healthy with this lately. So hopefully, she will take lots of notes on this episode. Um, you know, as a father, we have a lot of the listenership are parents. As a dad, how do you? Well, I want to make sure I phrase this question correctly. Is what I'm looking for, Scott, is what are keys to balancing your home life with your work life and other demands? Again, like going back, we know that it's not always going to be perfectly in balance, but are there things that you do that kind of give you an edge that may be able to help other parents out there in trying to, devote or structure their day in a way that's more conducive to being there for the things that will impact their lives the most?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I have been trying to remind the kids to be intentional without getting them on the productivity bandwagon. Like, I don't want them to get into their heads that they need to be productive. I do think that there's a difference between being intentional about your time and being productive. So I don't use the word productivity when I talk to the kids because that implies that their job is to produce, and then that's the whole capitalism, blah, blah, blah thing. Yeah. It's more that, like, is this thing that you're doing the thing you should be doing right now? Is this the time you should be spending? So if I tell them that about their time, then they know that I do the same to myself, right? So then, like, oftentimes the 13-year-old will come in like at 3:00 when they get back from school, and all they want to do is talk about their day. But that's a tough time for me. So I've been trying to balance, like, do I adjust my entire day because it's clear that the 13-year-old is having a moment basically every day at 3:30 when they get home from school? Like, do I just start clearing out? Like, that would be the perfect thing to do. Clear out a half an hour, sit with them, but then that would maybe push me later into the day, right? So now we've kind of come to a balance where he can come in, whether I'm on a meeting or not, I give him a hug, tell him I hope he's doing well, and I'll see him in 90 minutes, right? As opposed to keeping the door shut and don't bother me, because he comes in with all this energy.
Yeah.
And he wants to share his day. I can't really do the half an hour share right now. But all of that is trying to be above board and clear about what my expectations are and respecting that he's feeling some kind of way.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, that it's back to like setting those expectations. And the fact that your 13-year-old wants to run in from school and have conversations with you, Scott, is amazing. So my 11-year-old, almost 11-year-old triplets, my boys won't do that, but my girls will still. So hats off to you.
Hang on to that as long as you possibly can.
Yes. So as we're kind of wrapping our time down, because I know I only have you for a finite period of time. When you look back at all the talks that you've given on scaling yourself, what would be the one or two things that really resonate for you that you would want people to know about the points that you're trying to get across?
I think remembering that everyone is going to fall off the wagon. Right. That idea that you're going to have great weeks and you're going to have great days, and then you're not. Like, you're going to gain some weight back, or you're going to try to quit Diet Coke, and then you're going to get back on the Diet Coke. The idea that you're somehow going to like achieve a 6-pack and have like that Tim Ferriss, whatever life. It's just, there's only one Beyonce. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And there's 8 billion people who think that they're Beyonce, but for the most part, you're not Beyonce. Right. So having unreasonable expectations is the dream killer. But trying to set expectations with yourself, with your partner, with your family, with the understanding, like you mentioned before, that it's this wave. It goes up and down. There's going to be good weeks and bad weeks. But say that. Like, I had this conversation with my wife literally this morning. I was like, man, this last week kind of sucked, didn't it? She's like, yeah, why? I don't know. Like, I just talked about it. Just like, why do we think this week sucked? I'm like, oh, well, there was a package that was late and that was annoying and that threw us off and I lost a couple hours here and then this phone call and this family drama. And then, oh, okay, well, I kind of see now how that week fell apart. Okay, nobody was to blame. Just something happened. Having those kind of like postmortems and stuff helped us then reset. And then you go, all right, well, Monday is the day we'll try again. And then you just reset the odometer. But if you go into it with pain and with resentment and with ongoing angst about your own personal failures, then that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, that's well said. Well said. So before I get to my closing question, I want to ask, what's the best way for people to find you? Is it just to go to scotthanselman.com that I'll put in the show notes?
Yeah, my last name is Hanselman, like Hansel and Gretel. If you just go to hanselman.com, my last name, you'll find up in the top, I've got my YouTube. I've got a newsletter. I think a newsletter would be the fun thing to do. I've got a very occasional, couple of times a year newsletter, which is just fun links. I'm not selling you anything. Nothing that I have is for sale. Everything I have is free. Blog, podcast, newsletter, all that stuff is all good fun. So once you go to hanselman.com, you can find me on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, everywhere. So wherever you are, I'll be there hanging out and sharing my thoughts.
All right. So now to the closing question I ask all my guests. What is the best thing about being a parent?
What is the best thing about being a parent? I have a bunch of tweets. I actually made a whole Twitter about it, about my kids and the crazy stuff that they say. I think it's when your kid starts to say something that was unique that you never put in their head. Like they said a thing and it's not just them repeating stuff that you said. It's like a complete unique thought. Sometimes it'll happen when they're 2 or 3. If they're a boy, maybe when they're 15. I've got one in my Twitter right here. My 7-year-old said, "Is Beyonce Marvel or DC?" And I was like, that is such a good question. Like we had a whole conversation about whether she was in the Marvel universe or the DC universe. And what were you thinking? How did you even come up with that? I would not even know where to come up with that. So every time your kid has a thing like that, I put it on Twitter because I use it as an archive. So I have an archive of all the crazy stuff that my kids have said since they were born. One day I'll put it in a bathroom book or something.
Yeah.
A book of quotes.
That is by far, Scott, the most unique answer. And I think you're going to be a show like around number 50. And that's definitely the most unique answer that I've gotten on that question. So, Scott, I know that you're extremely busy and you get requests like this all the time. So I can't thank you enough for being on the Emotional Balance Sheet podcast, and definitely look forward to many more conversations to come.
Fantastic. Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much. And I wish you all the best of success with your show.
So what did we learn from our conversation with Scott? I think, number one, it's important to set realistic expectations about work, particularly for younger individuals who may feel this sense of urgency about everything they do. Remember, not every task is equally urgent or important. And I think Scott definitely lays out some really key tools on how to handle that. Number two is choosing to be intentional about our time can help us focus on the most important task. By doing this, it helps us to work more efficiently instead of just being quote unquote productive. And finally, I think to avoid creating systems that fail, we need to sort our task and work by impact and that intentionality and choose 2 to 3 things to accomplish each week that would make us feel good. I know I've started doing this more and more over the last 6 to 8 months, and it's really helped me. But I think the other thing that Scott points out is to have grace and kindness to yourself, which can also help to lead to success in finding that intentionality that you're looking for. Again, I hope you all have a great holiday season, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Emotional Balance Sheet Podcast. Please visit tamacapital.com to subscribe to this podcast or to connect with certified financial planner and registered investment advisor Paul Fenner of Tama Capital. And please join us again next time on the Emotional Balance Sheet Podcast.